My name is Dr. Tyler Tolbert.
And I'm Dr. Soren Paape.
And you're listening to the Fix Podcast,
your source for all things implant dentistry.
All right, and welcome back to the Fix Podcast. We have another very esteemed guest on with us today. Took us quite a while to wrangle him because he's a very busy guy. You're going to hear a lot about his resume and his current practice, which is still very, very busy. We have with us Dr. Samuel Jerik. He brings a wealth of information and knowledge and experience in full arch implantology. He's been doing this, frankly, longer than either Soren or I have been alive. So we're extremely humbled to have him on here. And, you know, one of the things that I originally reached out to him about, I saw that I believe at the upcoming Orca seminar, he's going to be lecturing on customized subperiosteals. And, you know, I knew that he had extensive experience with that, not just the ones that we're talking about today, but also the ones of yesteryear, how that's been done in the past, what we can learn from that, the good, the bad, the ugly, and what the next path forward for customized implants looks like. And there's really not anyone else I could think of that would bring a more comprehensive experience to speak to that topic than Dr. Jerik himself. Also, he's got a wealth of information about all things full arch. He does it all, everything that we talk about. So we're super, super excited to have him on, and very grateful for him to spare his time with us. So thanks so much for coming on, Dr. Jerik.
Thank you very much, Tyler. It's just a privilege to be part of it.
For sure. So for those who don't know who you are, we'd appreciate if you could just kind of give us a little bit of background about, you know, your journey through full arch as a dentist, you know, getting into implants, how things have kind of evolved since then, and kind of bring us all the way up to, you know, the current day.
Okay. Well, first of all, I'm a 1986 graduate at the University of Tennessee Health Center, dental school. And, you know, when we were in dental school, you know, dental implants were not taught. We had literally one lecture on it and had a great oral surgery department. We did a lot of work in the oral surgery department in undergrad. But basically, the lecture was, here I am, the oral surgeon. Here's this dental implant done by some cowboy over in East Arkansas. And here I am taking it out because it's failing and they're horrible. They don't work. And all I could think at the time was, wow, if these things work, wouldn't this be great? You know, better than a denture or a partial. So, you know, right out of dental school, I mean, I'm a CE junkie, and it started from day one. Believe it or not, my very first course, my very first CE was an implant course, and there were 5 manufacturers had it. Stereos, which later became Nobel or was bought out by Nobel, you know, was there. DB Driscoll was there, a couple others. There were plate form implants there. Of course, nobody's marketing subs because it was all root form, but and I think Corvent was there, you know, and took that course, then, you know, kind of wandered around for about a year. And I had an orthodontist in the clinic that was from a small town in East Arkansas. And he kept telling me, you need to go talk to my buddy up over there, Dr. Littlejohn, where I practice part-time. And he does more implants than anybody. And I'm like, you know, he's in the middle of farming country, Arkansas. There's no way this guy's doing implants in Arkansas, you know? And
Yeah.
so this goes on for about a year, and I called him up. And I said, hey, I heard you do implants. Yeah, he says. And then I said, do you mind if I come over and, you know, watch you do some implants one day? Come on. And of course, you know, he was working Fridays, and he starts at 7. And I drive an hour and a half over to his office and pull up in the back. And, you know, there's a couple of Mercedes, a couple of Lincoln Town cars, a couple of real nice pickup trucks. And I walk in the back door, and the operatory, the main OR, was right at the back door. And I walk in, he's already working at 7 a.m. And he's delivering a 14 unit, which we call FP1, cemented onto 10 implants with bilateral sinus grafts. And I think he'd done some soft tissue augmentation.
Wow.
And my mouth just fell open. I'd never seen anything like it,
Wow.
you know? So I ended up leaving his office at 7 that day, went to his house, wife cooked us dinner. He said, let's go up to the attic. And this guy had tens of thousands of slides. And he lectured, you know, nationally and internationally, even back in 87. And I went up there, and he says, okay, Bubba, he says, you know, he says, obviously smart kid and everything, talented. He says, but you don't know what you don't know. You don't know what you don't know. So at that point, he went through a bunch of stuff, and I said, "Hey, do you mind if I come back?" And he goes, "Anytime." So I started taking off Fridays. I worked 4 days, Monday through Thursday, and then every Friday I scrubbed in with Dr. Littlejohn and assisted him. And we did sinus augmentations, we did subs, we did plate forms.
Wow.
I think he didn't do Ramus frames; he didn't believe in them. But he had been in practice 20 years. He started out life as an engineer. He was very active in AAID. He was one of the original ABOI diplomates. He was in the first class that they accepted, one of the first examiners, honored fellow. And so, I was very blessed to have him in my life at that time.
Mm.
So he said, "Well, we got to get you in some continuing education." First place I went was Alabama Implant Study Group. And at the time, they were doing a congress, which was attended by 12 to 1,500 doctors internationally once a year. Root Lab was a big sponsor. They had a big crawfish board, and they were showing their implant restorations and their subperiosteals and everything there. Um, and they taught 5 courses a year, and it would be different instructors teaching everything from blades to root form to sinus augmentation. I mean, Bill Tatum was teaching sinus augs there. I learned sinus augmentation from the man himself. And then, they were teaching subperiosteals. So we would have a live surgery. It was done at Caraway Medical Hospital. We'd have a live surgery, closed circuit TV on that, and attended all those and kept going back. Ended up, I started doing some surgeries for them and taking some patients to Birmingham to do that. And I got into AID, and they really weren't pushing the associate fellow stuff at that point in time yet. Started going to those meetings and Southern District meetings, and just had a lot of information coming from a lot of different areas. Of course, this is all before the internet. Uh, you can't get on YouTube or TikTok and see how to do a pterygoid or any of this stuff like you can today. So, you had to travel. And, I'd just gotten married. My wife was a pharmaceutical rep. We waited a while to have kids. So we were double income, no kids. I traveled the country, and I was doing 100, 200 hours a year continuing education, all implantology related. But the big turning point was, Carl Mish, Mish Institute. It had just gotten started. At the time, it was still in Dearborn. Carl was teaching it. One of his wives, Lori, was teaching the office management side. So you would literally take your staff to the first one, office managers, assistants, everybody. Hell, I think the hygienist even went. And it was all didactic, and Lori would teach the office management side. Carl was all didactic. And then we went back 5 times over the course of a year and a half, taking our own patient. And we started out with the root form, then we did a plate form, then we did a sinus aug, and we put the implants in the sinus aug, and we actually did a subperiosteal. Carl was teaching that, and he was making some modifications, and we did one of his modified. But Carl's courses compared to the courses today, you literally had 2 hours to do whatever you were doing. You had a mentor. I mean, Jack Hahn was one of my mentors. Craig, his brother, was one of my mentors. It just, you think an all-star. I mean, it's just unbelievable the opportunity at the time. But if you didn't get done in 2 hours, they pulled you out. You went to the class, and Carl was lecturing, and we're learning the divisions of available bone. We're learning, RP1 to FP4. It's just crazy. I mean, we're learning all the prosthetic, all the bone categories, and he brought everything together. And I'm very dyslexic, and so just being able to visualize and see, it just made it where any patient came in, they fit a category, and it was like, he was the first one. I think he coined the thing that implant dentistry is a prosthetic discipline with a surgical component,
Mm.
and so you never put implants in unless you play in the prosthetics. So that was just huge in my learning. But I was able to, of course, do Hilt Tatum's sinus course. There were other courses I did back then. Curry's bone technique. Craig Mish had a monoblock grafting course, all sorts of courses back in the time. But Mish was the big turning point. Hilt was trying to make implantology a specialty even back then. By that time, I had received my fellow with AID in 1998, I believe it was, and then 99, I sat for my boards and passed those and became a diplomate. And at that time, it was like, look, I got a program starting up at Loma Linda. We're doing a residency program. You'll get a master's in implantology, and we're going to take this and we're going to make this a new specialty in dentistry. So I started doing that, and it was out in California, Seventh Day Adventist. So we couldn't do anything on Saturday. We'd start on Sunday and went all week, and it was once a month, and I loved it. The people that were there, the great doctors in the course. Jaime Lozada, who's director now, he was in the first class. I was literally in the first class with these guys, and I did it for 6 months. We'd do the California 1 month. We'd go back to Mish Institute, do that for 1 month, and I did it for 6 months. And then my son was born, and I've kind of a review because Mish was so comprehensive. So I bailed out, and that's the only thing I regret is bailing out. It would have been fun to have that master's. But as a general dentist, in learning from Mish Institute, I was there with periodontists, prosthodontists, oral surgeons, and a few handful of general GPs. This wasn't taught in dental school. It wasn't taught in any residency program. So, to get education in implantology, we were learning from these practitioners like Hilt and Little John and Harris and Cremeen and Mark Davis and Mozan, that had been doing it for 10, 20 years already. And, there was a lot of turf wars so far as well. Only oral surgeons should do this. Nobel would only sell their implants to oral surgeons because only they could get certified in using a Nobel implant. But the fun thing was, I was in Mish early enough that I actually got certified Nobel. Never placed their implant at the time because it was a little insulting. They wouldn't let a GP place it, only oral surgeons.
Hmm.
But it was a long, drawn out process. And I see so many young surgeons that come out of school now, 1 or 2 years in, and they're wanting to do zygos. And I'm like, guys, take your time, get your reps in, take and do this the right way. And back then it took a really, really long time to do this. But I was blessed to have some really good mentors, Dr. Little John, Dr. Mish, Tatum, Boyd Harris out of Fayetteville, Arkansas, Bill Cremeen out of Marion, uh, you know, Dan Root and Rob White and Rick Maynard from Root Lab were extremely instrumental in my training. I'd get myself in all sorts of trouble and they'd get me out of it every time. And Rob, especially, I didn't like using Root because they were so damn expensive and it took too long, and I could get it done for half the time, the price, twice as quick, from a local lab. But every time I'd get it, there'd be issues with it.
Yeah.
And, what I found out was you get what you pay for, take your time, dial things in. And, so they were very instrumental in my journey as well. Other things that I've done since then, early on, there was about 5% of the cases where the occlusion would just be a train wreck. And I realized I spent all this time in surgery and I've spent zero time in surgery. So I jumped in Frank Spear when he was really big in the early 2000s, and he was doing hotel courses, and there'd be 1,000 people attending, down at the Swan in Orlando. And I did all those courses. And then if you had attended all those, he'd invite you for a fee, of course, to show up at his office, and there was like 10 of us in there, and you'd spend 4 or 5 days with him one on one, doing cases, dialing this in, and Frank would. It was mainly cosmetic, aesthetic dentistry with a light touch of implantology, but the big thing was, how to uh, build these occlusions and these occlusal schemes, and how to dial in that 5% that you're having problems with. So, once I had Spear in, it was really instrumental in getting a lot of the issues that we had with occlusion and bites and things of that nature down the line. So yeah, it was a long process. And along the way, you meet great guys like Dr. Rakowski, who you've had
Yeah.
on. David Mulligan and I went to dental school together.
Wow.
I literally didn't see him for 39 years, and he was at one of the last orcas that I was teaching at, and we got it was just like we'd seen each other yesterday,
That's cool.
and it's a great opportunity. I was very active in AAID. In my 40s, was a um, president of the Southern District. I was getting ready to go do the national deal and go up the ladder there. And my kids were young teenagers, and I decided to step back, spend more time with my family. Wait, and I told them, I said, look, I'll come back when the kids go to school, to college. And I did. Don't regret it at all. One of the best decisions I've ever made in my life for my family. But the funny thing was, in that 8, 9, 10 years, things had moved on. They didn't need me, and I found out that there were other things to do. I was still very active, but politically I wasn't. But AID was very instrumental because I felt very dedicated to the diplomat and the fellow credentials as being bona fide. I was very active in running that stuff through the legal system, supporting Frank Recker and his efforts to make sure that our credentials were recognized in many states, and we were very successful. When I was on the board of trustees, I really worked hard to market the AID as the premier uh, contact point for patients to find doctors who had qualifications and who had been tested. Uh, and, you know, that's something that I felt like was very, very important. And then, of course, it was a board examiner for both AAID and for ABOI, and still do that from time to time. But it's a wonderful, wonderful career. So far as being able to be there and see all these guys early on and see the evolution of dentistry. And the last 5 years since 2020, everything I do is completely different than I did before. You know,
It's been a
and
fast time.
it's completely different.
Yeah.
It's not even close. I mean, my all on four practice is different. Even I started my own dental lab. I'm no longer with Root. I've got 3 technicians upstairs. I've got 2 designers. We're doing casework for other doctors across the country, doing AOX design, same day design. We're milling for people.
Mhm.
We're even doing high end aesthetic crowns and zirconia veneers. 70% of my practice is AOX, and 30% is still high end full mouth crown and bridge.
Cool.
Uh, it's all green to me. I love it. And prepping teeth does not. I know it's insulting for a lot of guys, but I love it. I still enjoy it.
It's still cool.
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it takes me the same amount of time to prep a full arch and get them in temps as it does an AOX. They go out 3 weeks. We dial on the temps. We get new bites. We mill everything out upstairs, and I bring them back, sedate them one time, put it all in, tweak their bite a couple of times, and we're done.
Yeah.
And
Not
it's
bad.
not that easy with AOX. So
Mhm.
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah, you're right.
it's still a lot of fun.
Well, I certainly appreciate that the storied history you have in implantology all the way back to really its beginnings, at least as far as it became widespread in the U.S. And I really love that as you tell your story, you kind of tell it through all the people that influenced you and helped you along the way, and I think that speaks a lot to you.
Well, I stand on their
Yeah,
shoulders.
right.
I would not be here without these men in my life, and the mentors and all the friends that have helped us. And the tremendous thing now being part of Orca and Full Arch Masters and Mod Institute is the social threads that we're on,
Right.
WhatsApp and things like that. And I get to mentor the kids, but I learned just as much from them. I've got a printer problem, or I've got a sintering oven issue. These kids are all over it. And I get my designer said, "Hey, go talk to Doctor So and So. He's got our answer over here."
Cool.
So it's a win-win for all of us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. Tyler and I talk about that all the time, how we're so lucky to be in the implant space when we are, because we get to just stand on the giants that came before us. So it's a really cool time to be a part of implant dentistry,
Yeah.
and we wouldn't be able to be here without guys like you.
Well, I think this is a good lead into the patient-specific implant or subperiosteal.
Agreed. Yeah.
Okay. It's a sub, all right? Whether it's patient specific or, I just did an article with Vishy Brahman and North American uh, Clinics of Oral Surgery, co-authored with him on implantology, and I went really heavy into the history, and I named it classic subperiosteal. So
Mm.
we've got CSI and we've got PSI. And I attended some lectures with some guys, international, that were doing the PSIs and promoting different companies and stuff, and very good information. And I actually did a podcast with one of them, and I was glad to hand the gauntlet off and say, go young man, do this. And but there was something that was missing, was all this great information, this research, and I do mean research, published peer-reviewed literature research, R&D from Root Lab and from doctors like Little John Cremeen, and especially Boyd Harris in Fayetteville, that had perfected the mandibular subperiosteal. And they were doing some maxillary subs, but not a lot. But
Mhm.
we come in with this PSI and we're like, okay, so we're doing a CT subs. Well, um, Dr. James did his first CT sub in 1970. And from 1980 on, Loma Linda only did CTs. They didn't do a two-stage surgery. They didn't expose the ridge. They didn't do the wash impression on it. They didn't pour that up. They did a CT, and they didn't have stereolithic models. They took mylar and they took each segment and they traced it out, cut it, and then they stacked it, and that's how they made the
No
model.
way. Wow. I
So
understand that was a much more modern application. I did not know.
oh yeah. Well, I mean, literally, my last lecture on subs was 2004 in Hawaii, and my topic was the three-appointment sub. They come in for records, um, you know, and literally we put it in the next appointment, and then we took the sutures out. And it's 2004. It's the World Congress of Oral Implantology. Lenny Linkow asked me to come do it. Literally flew to Hawaii. I did my lecture and I flew back home the next day. I wasn't even there 24 hours. There were like 12 people. The biggest thing I got from that was ICAT was there. Okay. And I'd been taking all my patients to the hospital, to a helical hospital scanner, and we're putting dowel rods on them, and it's taking 45 minutes to scan them. And, there was one doctor that was hypnotizing his patients to make them be still. And I just say, don't move. And we'd tape a radio paper rod on their face, check for movement. And there was one lab in Colorado that could make a stereolithic model. But, I was lecturing on that in 2004. Nobody was interested. Nobody, so I just kind of faded off in the sunset and said, well, I'll still do a few subs here and there, And then fast forward, there's an ICAT there. I'm like, okay, so I buy one. I've got the first one in the state of Arkansas, and I start doing cone beam CTs, treatment planning, and all that stuff. And I send my DICOM data. And back then it was on uh, a tape. We didn't even have CDs to do it, much less the internet to do
Yeah.
it. And we'd send it there. We'd get a model for $1,000. I'd send it to Root. They'd make a replica of it, stone model, and then we'd do the implant. It was great. I mean, the whole first stage surgery was gone. Then we got to the point where, okay, now I can do I could take the DICOM data and I can segment it with my software myself. I can print the model in my lab, and now I can send that to whoever.
Mhm.
The last ones that I've been doing, I've been working uh, with Nate Farley, prosthodontist in Phoenix, and he and I are literally doing it 100% digital design. We take the DICOM, we segment it, we use Mesh Mixer, Exocad, Blender. We set up our design. We milled them, we printed them, whatever. But they started out kind of rudimentary because the printing process is not as pretty. But we've done a couple with the lab, America's Dental Lab in Kansas, that we did the digital design, sent him the STL, he printed it, he invested it, he cast it, and he cast out a cobalt chrome molybdenum. And it's beautiful, classic tripodial mandibular sub. And, so there's lots of things going on with the technology. And, I'm currently working with a couple different international dental implant companies that are doing subperiosteals and said, hey, can we tweak the design? Can we do this? Can we do that? And I've been very well received by, one group, the other. It's kind of crickets. But the big thing that I want to bring in is all this stuff that we learned in the 80-year history of subperiosteals doesn't just go out the window because we can print it out of titanium and put some screws in and say, oh, it bonds to bone. Okay. Yeah. But, the classic sub set on top of bone, basal bone, hard bone, settling was the big issue. If you were on the maxilla, it's membranous bone, it's thin bone. If you were on the alveolus, Division A ridges in Misch classification, they resorbed. And so the implant settled and had movement. And there were a lot of design flaws early on. Gustav Dahl did this in 37 and he did a intraoral impression, x-rays and probing, and he scraped that model and he said, okay, this is what we're going to make our sub on. Kerskov and Bergman and Goldberg, 4851, they first did the first two stage where they did a direct bone impression. And, with direct bone impressions, a lot of people didn't reflect enough, so they didn't get a good lateral loading of the implant. It was all crustal. So that's where you see the tabletop designs on the early subs, which all failed.
Mm-hmm.
They were a failure. And, one of the big things like 1970, Dr. James from Loma Linda, they had like two different patients who had donated their body. And there was a doctor out of Puerto Rico that had done histology on it, but they saw suspensory ligament out of dense collagenous fibers. And he postulated that subs were held in the suspensory ligament and that compressive forces or crustal loading was, osteoclastic,
Mm.
and that if you loaded the mandible laterally on the lateral ramus or in the symphysis, that it would be more off axis or a tensile type loading, and it would promote bone growth. And used to the first mandibular subs would have struts on the lingual, and when the patient's mandible opens wide, it gets narrower, and they would have dehiscence there and issues there. So with James' early theories about this, we changed where we loaded the implant, and success rates went up.
Mm.
We saw, and today in the current PSIs, we see a lot of abutments coming out of the first and second molar regions on the mandible. Well, what do you have down there? You've got a buccinator, you've got the myhyoid, you've got very low bone volume, very thin attached tissue in this area, and it's a problem for recession and infection. Well, Root and Linka, funny story. Linka was doing a direct bone impression. He didn't want to expose because he had a totally distant nerve. So he exposed both ramus, he exposed the symphysis, does three different separate impressions, and then one impression of that, sends it to the lab and says, make me a sub. And at the time, the framework went all the way from ramus forward.
Mm-hmm.
And Rob got it, and he looks at Danny and says, what do we do? And they finally decided, well, we can do a big connecting bar, a meso bar, from the ramus and come out of the ascending ramus with one strut, come to the canine, have your other permucosal strut, and go around. So it's a continuous bar all the way around. And they just put O-rings in it and an overdenture. And so they sent it back to Lenny, and Lenny put it in and loved it. Worked perfect, and it got the permucosal post out of that molar region. So Lenny was on the stage like a couple of months later at one of the big implant meetings talking about his new tripodial sub that he designed. And Rob goes back kind of upset to Danny. He's like, "You gonna let him do this? Take credit for our design?" And Dan's like, "Well, of course I am." He said, "If it works, we're gonna sell a ton of them." And he said, "If it screws up, it's all Lenny's
Well, it's
fault."
all on him.
I mean, Dan Taylor was a very, very brilliant man,
He's practical.
great businessman, but moreover, he did some tremendous work in our field. And, that shouldn't be lost. So, today we see very, very heavy, thick substructures. They run it through finite analysis, element analysis. And I'm not a biomaterials expert. We had one in Alabama Implant Study Group, Jack Lemons. You could always run this stuff by him. But, if I could talk to Jack today, I said, "Jack, yeah. How thin can I make a titanium implant compared to the old chrome, cobalt, molybdenum, titanium implants? Because it's a stronger metal and it's got better flexural and all this other strength. But the old classic subs, they were all designed with a lattice snowshoe type structure
Mhm.
over the ramus and over the symphysis to spread the occlusal loading out on remote areas. And some of my lectures, I talk about subperiosteal as being the first remote anchorage implant.
Mhm.
And so you didn't want crestal loading. You wanted lateral ramus, you wanted symphysis, areas like that, well away from your permucosal areas. And, you know, I literally have not lost but one mandibular sub out of the approximately 100 I've done, and I chose to take it out because the patient was moving. And, I started having better luck with shorter root form implants, and I just popped her in some root forms and I sent her to Texas to, to, to be free. But, with the large frameworks that we're seeing, and they run it through finite and they say, you got to do this and you got to do that and everything. I get it, but there's such a thing as biocompatibility or biomechanical design. And when you place an implant on bone, whether it's bonded to bone or not, you want the periosteum to reattach to the bone as quickly and as well as you can, as fast as you can. And so, those struts, a lot of them that I see are very bulky. They've got right angles. They're in the mucosa. And, first lecture, I saw a PSI lecture. I was sitting there and I'm looking at the design. I said, it's going to dehisce here. One of the guys sitting next to me, Bo Wright from Kentucky, goes, "How do you know that?" I said, "Just watch." And about five slides later, we get into complications and there's a dehiscence there. And the tissue won't tolerate that bulk. And so we really need to debulk these things. We need to not crestally load. I see a lot of mandibular subs that are loaded in the molar region with three per mucosal posts coming out of the molar regions. And, if you just take a little look back at where history was and what designs proved out to be very successful, modify the PSI designs, use titanium, use printed uh, techniques and things like this, I think we would see success rates improve. I really think that I get a lot of complications in my clinic because I've been doing this a while, and I've seen some really ugly, PSIs out there, and I think that complications are definitely underreported. And when you go to literature, we're getting 2 year results. I don't see anything long term yet, with 26% complication rates at 2 years. And I just think that we really need to take pause at what we're doing here and see what used to work, see if we can implement those uh, uh, developments and concepts into to the new concept.